Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you to the organizers for allowing me to gate crash this party. And, uh, and I'm very thankful to be here. So I'm going to talk about something completely different in terms of rock art to what we've people know and have experienced. So it's not about Southern Africa, it's not about France, but it's about England and particularly a county in the very northeast of England called Northumberland. And the rock art there, as you will see, is just extraordinary. It's very different to what you know from Southern Africa and France. And I'm going to be talking about three projects that I've been involved with since I arrived in England in 2002. So, as many of you know, that I'm a South African archaeologist. I've worked in museums for many years, and my career has more or less been broken into two: half the time in South Africa and half the time in England, in the north of England. And I've now been retired for 2 years, but have still got an active research program that I conduct by myself. And I'm going to be running you through three projects quite quickly. I won't be able to go into them in depth, but try and pull out some salient points about them which might be of use in terms of this program and of interest. So the three projects are the web access to the Beaconsfield archive of Northumberland rock art, which was the first project I did when I arrived in England. That took place 2002 to 2004. So I didn't, that's a project that had been set up before I arrived, and then I was luckily employed to do it. And then the two further projects that I'm going to mention are projects that I was part of generating. So I was the principal investigator in both, or co-principal investigator in both. One is rock art on mobile phones, and another one was called Heritage and Science, working together in the care of rock art. And you can see those took place with 2010, 2011, 2013 to 2015, although the latter one did carry on for after that time. And they deal with audience development and engaging with rock art enthusiasts and the general public. So obviously we've got the general public, but then in England or in the UK generally, there's a group of people that are particularly enthusiastic about rock art. So we kind of split them into the public and rock art enthusiasts. Now, Northumberland rock art, and in fact most of the Neolithic and early Bronze Age rock art in the UK, it's really in the north of England and into Scotland and in Ireland, is very different to, as I said, to the paintings and in fact the engravings from here and from Southern Africa. It's all out in the open. They're carvings, we call them, instead of engravings. They're much sort of cruder in a way. They're generally all abstract. There's one or two sites with some figurative carvings, and a couple of sites where they're in rock shelters, no caves, sort of quite shallow rock shelters. But for the most part, 99%, they're out in the open. They're exposed. I suppose they're more akin to, you do get, I think, here in France, in the north of France particularly, part of what's called the Atlantic tradition, you get rock art of this nature as well. So this is, it's geometric based. There are lots of different shapes and forms that you get in the art. It's something which, as coming from South Africa, it confused me to begin with. I couldn't see it. I thought, what am I doing here, looking at rock art that I know nothing about? But after a couple of field trips, I got it, and then I began to learn the language of the rock art. Because rock art in different parts of the world, there are different languages attached to the rock art. So the primary aim of the first project was to put Stan Beckinsale's Northumberland Rock Art Archive onto the web. So Stan was an amateur archaeologist who he was a school teacher, a headmaster of schools, but he had, in the mid-1960s, developed an interest in this ancient rock art in Northumberland and across, in fact, the UK as a whole, and Ireland, and he recorded a lot of sites. So I came in, I worked with Stan, we visited over 700 panels, we GPSed them, we photographed them. As part of that 720 panels that we visited, we found another 250 new ones. And the challenge of the project was to, as I've got there in front of you, create an attractive and academically sound website with wide appeal to act as a showcase for Northumberland rock art. So it was really, it had to be academically sound, but it had to be a showcase. And I should explain something here which confused me as well when I moved to England, was the museum that I worked in South Africa for the most part, the rock art sites were confidential. We didn't tell members of the public where they were, and you wouldn't generally, you could share photographs, but we wouldn't give locations. People had to be bona fide researchers for the museum to provide locations, long and lat points for the rock art. In the UK, there's a completely different ethos. Everything is out in the public domain. People publish books with now GPS points, but previously with sort of longitude and latitude points taken off maps, and that's open to the public. It confused me, it worried me to begin with, but that's how it is. We produced, I think, an attractive looking website. Unfortunately, you can't see it anymore, but we come back to that. It was a purpose-built website. It was database-driven. It was interactive, and it contained data from over 1,000 panels. Most of them were out in the countryside. Some of them were in captivity, so to speak, in museums. And we put over 6,000 images onto this website. A lot of them were Stan's drawings. He would go in and rub them, and then he'd make line drawings out of those rubbings. We scanned all of those. We had some of his old photographs, which we scanned as well, took a whole lot of new photographs, and we put about over 6,000 images onto the website. You can see on the top right in that map, not the top right, in the top right of England, I suppose, with the very top of that map on the right-hand side is Scotland. That the red and yellow map, that's the map of Northumberland, that's the county that I was working in. Can you see? All right. We launched the website on the middle of January 2005. It was done through a live broadcast by the BBC on site. The press officer at the university arranged it, and it took us completely by surprise. We had no idea of how the website was going to be received, and things went bananas. In fact, we thought for that first weekend, there were so many hits on the website that the website was going to collapse. It never happened, fortunately, and we had a much. I don't know if we really anticipated how it would go, but it just was extraordinary, the amount of hits that we had from all over the world. And that continued for, the first year was particularly strong, but then it continued for the second, third, and into the fourth year as well. So in 3.5 years, we had 17 million hits on this website, and 12 million pages were visited. It was just out of all of our expectations. But it comes also to a point earlier, sort of was alluded to earlier by Mandy, is that, after 3.5 years, we didn't have the capacity to continue working on it, because it was a project funded. It was for 2.5 years. We sort of looked after it a bit for another 3.5 years, and then we kind of lost touch with it. So I have no idea what happened between then and the time the website was shut down by the university. The next project, as I mentioned, was rock art of mobile phones. And that was and this is the aim, as we had it in the project proposal, which was funded all of these were funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK, to enhance visitor experiences at rock art sites in Northumberland by repurposing information and images from the Beaconsala era. Era is a subsequent project where I won't mention, and deliver them on site via a mobile platform. So to create a mobile platform that people could actually access information about these panels or sites in the field. And we created this website, and so we chose 3 places in Northumberland, Lawdenshaw, Dodlaw, and Wheatwood Moor, and altogether we profiled 8 different panels on the mobile website, which could work on your phone as well. The stats weren't as dramatic as the initial website, which expectedly was the case, because it was primarily for people in the field. in the countryside. And these panels aren't very well visited, but we got sort of 5,000 users, or just around 5,000 users in 4,500 years. 4,500 years, I got, as an archaeologist, I think in 1,000 years. But it was 4.5 years, about 30,000 page views. Interestingly, people spending about 4 minutes per visit on the, on the site, which is quite a lot of time in terms of digital time. So they were certainly accessing those who were, and sort of delving into it, those who went onto the site. And there were just under 10,000 online and on-site responses to questions about rock art, and I'll come back to that. And then the Heritage Science Project, which was a bit later. And this is a bit of a mouthful, the objective, but I'll read it out. To co-produce a user-friendly, non-invasive condition assessment risk evaluation toolkit for gathering and organizing information essential for the long-term preservation of open-air rock art. And the acronym for that project became CARE, which is Condition Assessment Risk Evaluation. And that ran from, 2013 to 2015, although it did have a much longer tail. These were different projects, as you can see, quite different projects, but there was a common thread running through all of them, and that was that people were at the center of the projects, either to share information with people and or to include them in the creation of the product, that the product that was the output of the projects, particularly with the second two. So with the Beckinsale website, we developed an audience development plan. And what we did there was we identified 5 target groups. I won't run through them, but you've got 3 in front of you, and another 2. And for each of these, we try to work out why they would want to know about rock art, okay? And what information would we need to provide them in order to satisfy that need about the rock art. So we went through all of these independently. And that informed a lot of what we did in terms of the website and how we constructed and designed the website. So we won't speak. And this was you saw the main homepage for the website, but a key part of the website as well was what we called the interactive zone. So the website, if you look at to the left, was the 3 main areas of the website was the browse, the search, and the interactive zone. The browse, you could browse everything according to things like panels, parish map. And interestingly, I think I don't know who mentioned this yesterday or the day before, and this was 2004, we had a section on wheelchair access, where people in wheelchairs or with impaired physical mobility were able to get to some panels which were close to the nearest access point. So we actually took that into consideration already 20 years ago. But we had a search facility where you could actually search on multiple criteria. So you want to know about a certain motif in this kind of a panel in that area, and you can plug that in, and a list would come up with how many sites or panels there were associated with that. And that was quite a powerful research tool. We don't know how often it was used, but I do certainly know one paper written by a postdoc who was working at Durham at the time that relied extensively on that search tool to create a data set. But probably for the purposes of this meeting, the interactive zone was the most critical, because we had lots of different sections. Well, we had 4 sections, lots of different things: an outreach zone, a learning journey. So we created interpretive, and I use interpretive not in terms interpretation of the rock art, but interpretation of the rock art to the public. So that's the context in which I'm using the term interpretation. We provided like background to stand, background to rock art in different parts of the world. We art and about tips, how to find rock art. We created some not with dinosaurs, but walking with rock art journeys. I think there were about 10 of them, where we gave people suggestions on how to do that, and just a range of things that was on that website. With the Beckinsale website, I developed the audience development plan, and then ran it past a committee that I had that oversaw the project, and they tweaked it with me. But when it came to developing the rock art on the mobile phones project, which had been, I co-PI'd with a person called Areti Galani, who does not have an archaeological background. He comes from a digital heritage background. And we were starting to talk about what we should put onto this digital heritage platform. And I said to Areti, well, you know, I've been looking at rock art and sharing rock art with people on tours for, I don't know, 30 years at that point, 40 years, I don't know, can't remember. And Areti very wisely told me, Aaron, that's very nice that you've done all of that, but let's go and ask the people what they want. Let's, you know, it's very nice that you've done that, and I'm sure you've got lots of good ideas. She wasn't condescending, but it was quite humorous, the way she did that to me. And so that became one of the ethoses of that project, and we continued during CARE in principle. It was a different situation. So in both the RAMP and the CARE projects, we had a series of workshops, which involved taking people out on site to look at panels and to discuss different kinds of things, because they had different kinds of outputs, and then followed up by focus groups that we had in a hall in different parts of Northumberland. And these workshops were towards the beginning of the projects and towards the end as well. So if we look at RAMP, Areti was absolutely right. And I was humbled by what she told me, because a lot of the things that people wanted to know were things that I knew they would want to know from my own experiences, but there were other things that I'd never thought about. And the three things that came to the fore was findability. How do you find these panels? You might have a GPS marking, right? But sometimes these panels are hidden in bushes. And if you've got a 3, 4, 5 meter average to your GPS reading, how do you find them? So we had to make provision for findability in terms of the mobile website. People wanted design, they wanted to speculate. They wanted to have the encourage to speculate. It doesn't mean that we give them false information, but within the information that we give them, they wanted to have the desire to speculate. And that sort of came up on the right-hand side. You know, we haven't really got and these are verbatim words from people. We haven't got a clue. I mean, there are loads of ideas, but we don't know. Because it's a mystery, it's much more alluring, yeah. And then you can read the other two. But I must emphasize it's in the context of Northumberland rock art. It would be different in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, in France, and I appreciate that. But they wanted that as well. In terms of the sense of self and place, the people wanted, they commented that being in the landscape makes them alive and free, tranquil, exhilarated, and they want more time to absorb the landscape, to experience what was there to feel. So they wanted us to encourage them to do that as well as part of what we provided them. So we created this website. This is the Wardenshaw being profiled there. We gave them a lot of information, some information. We profiled 3 rocks. At Wardenshaw, there are over 120 rocks with carvings on them, but we focused on 3 prominent ones that were reasonably close to the car park. I can't go into, there won't be time to go into this. We provided downloads on the right-hand side. Which is the pointer? Yeah. So we used some of Stan's drawings at these individual rocks. So this in fact when you enter into the car park, so and you go up here, and the rocks are marked, and you can get information on how to reach them with GPS readings, but also with the details: walk 300 meters, turn to the left, walk for another 200 meters. You could do that and you can see, in fact, on the right-hand side, we had these like signs finger signs on poles that people could access. On those poles as well, there was a QR code that you could access, and also if that didn't work for you, a web address that you could access on your phone, which would take you to the mobile website, and then that would help you on your way to get to the different places. I don't think it's going to work, and there might not be time. I have got do you think it might work? Is it going to take up too much time? This is just to give you a sense of, so we created, no, we're going back. We created some dialogue as well as part of the Desire for Speculation, which we then had people read and talk in a local dialect, not a local accent, not a dialect. So it's not working. It's all right. People can look later if they want. The web address is there.
Sorry.
That's fine.
But
yeah. Yeah, there we go. So I spoke about this desire for speculation. So we put two things into there. I mean, there's a limit to how much you can put in. You can't put in an essay, but we asked two questions of the public. The carved stones were for, and then we gave them an option, 5 options of what they could say they thought they were, why they were there. And there was the option to actually write something, you know, something completely different, and if they wanted to actually put that into a box. And that they were were they colored or left in their pecked state? Because these are pecked or carved. So we don't know, because these things have been out in the open for 4,000 years, minimum 3,500 years. If there was ochre, if they had been painted, they would have been sort of washed away, and these stones are eroding as well over time. So angas, we don't know whether they were painted or not. So we gave people the option to say whether or not they thought they were. With regard to the, did it move? No. No, it's not moving. Angas. Did it go? No, you went backwards.
Next one?
Okay, next one. Okay, so the CARE tool, and that I'm not going to read out the objective of the CARE tool, but this was different in the sense that it was about condition monitoring and risk evaluation. So the academics, the heritage managers, the various, the people from different sciences, we had engineers, we had people who worked on lichen and all involved in helping us try and develop a monitoring tool, a report form that could be completed as part of monitoring. That we didn't think the public would be in a position to hugely help us with. But what we wanted to do was to make it a tool that was accessible to the public, that we would encourage them to complete it. And in order for that to happen, we needed to know how they responded to some of the categories and the wording that we had in those forms. Because we can think to ourselves that these things make perfect sense. So for example, we had one of the criteria that we had, was the height of the panel. How do you measure the height of a panel? Now that might sound quite simple, but when you put it out to the general public, they'll come up with 10, 15, ways among 10 people that have lots of different ways. So we had to find a way that we could actually encourage them to complete the form in such a way that that the form was meaningful to them. It was on that basis that we got members of the public in to work with us through each and every single criterion, that they would fill it in a way that would be useful to heritage managers. There was a lot more to the project. I don't have the time to go into all of that, but you can see we had people in the field with clipboards and pieces of paper, and I was talking about the height, with tape measures, measuring the height, then feeding back to us what worked and what didn't work, and what we should tweak or change in order to make it more user-friendly for the public. So that was the public component of it, and you can see we retreated into a room, nice and comfortable, and like we have here at the back, we had on the side of the table refreshments and things to eat as well, because that's like an important ingredient, or maybe the most important ingredient of a workshop. So we completed the form, and what was not on our radar to begin with when we started the project, because this was a university project and there were, you meet different people in the university. This wasn't me, but two of my colleagues who were working on the project went to a university fair, which was supposed to encourage interdisciplinary work between departments. And they started speaking with some computer scientists, and the idea arose to actually put the form onto the phone. Now, those are old phones, but you get the drift. To put it onto an app. So we actually created a monitoring app, which we tested. You can see on the left-hand side, had some students in the field testing the app, and it actually worked really well, provided, of course, you had internet. But if there wasn't internet, you were able to save what you had put into the app to upload at a later point. And we also created pamphlets, which we put at different visitor centers, about 700 of them across Northumberland. There was a downside to all of this, but I'll come back to that later. All these projects were published. Possibly the most useful one to this audience would be the ones that we published about the ramp, because they discuss some of the methodology that we used. And I don't have a digital heritage background, so there was a lot of that was informed by Eyzies specialisms. One on the top right, I Want to Be Provoked, and that title came out of one of the workshops. A man who I remember clearly because he actually did some teaching for me. He was called Malcolm Green. And at one point in the workshop, he banged on the table. He said, "I want to be provoked." Where that comes from is, I don't know if I think maybe it's the English-speaking world, the person who's perceived as the father, so to speak, or the mother, no, but he was a man of heritage interpretation, this man called Freeman Tilden, who worked for the National Park Service in the US in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, I think. And he published a book, and I'll show the title of it a bit later, where he developed 6 principles of interpretation, because that was his work within the National Park Service, to actually present what was in the parks to members of the public. And the 4th principle was the chief aim of interpretation is not to instruct, but to provoke. And that's what Malcolm was responding to. He didn't feel at that point that we were provoking people sufficiently with what we were putting into the app. So he banged on the table and he said, I want to be provoked. Okay, so we tried to provoke. I'm coming to the end now. So just in conclusion, the conversation I had with Areti, and Areti's quite a bit younger than me, but we get on very well. I remain in contact with her even after I've retired. She was like, how, like you talk to a Madala, you talk to an old person, that's very nice, but let's try to do something different. So that made a very big difference to me, just working with the public, seeing that they want to know, how old and where it is and what it was made with and what academics think it means. But there were other things as well they wanted to know. Now, what we discovered in Northumberland will be different to if you did this exercise in other parts of the world. People want to know, so it'd be different in Tanzania, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Namibia. But it would be worth finding out, if you're bringing people to a site, what do they want to know? It's the same here. The same would apply here in France, I would imagine. What do the public want to know? I appreciate this is not always possible. So, for example, I did an exhibition, Color and Power, where I spoke about the rock art of the Okaklamba Drakensberg in South Africa, which was shown in Altamira in 2019 and then in Alta in 2021. I didn't have a group of people around me at the time that I could speak to about about what they would want to see in an exhibition of that nature. So I had to rely on my own, go back to like a pre-Areti and rely on what I thought people would want to know and what would be interesting to people. So it was a risk I took, but anyway, I took it. But these are producing, especially university-based digital outputs is risky, and it comes to the point Mandy made earlier. So, have you got a little bit of time, another minute or two? Yeah, 1 minute. Yeah, that's fine. That's all I need. So, in 2015, the university, because the Beckinsale archive was budget fund, it was a project funded, and then once that project finished, there was no one. It was built very robust, the website, So it lasted for 10 years. It started to lose some functionality towards the end, but it worked pretty well. The university in 2015 deemed it to be a security risk to the university system. And long story short, there wasn't funding to update it, so they turned off the switch, and that was the end of that project. The second project still is out there. You can, and when we're really pleased, from 2011, the mobile website is still available. I was looking at these images that I put here were ones that I captured just a week or two ago. So that's working. But the care one, again, suffered the same fate. You know, the app stopped working. So we had people, after I retired, I had still some money left, and we used that money to get software developers to redo the app, basically, and it was all redone. But there was just I'd left the university. The other person who was working with me on it, the other archaeologist or heritage manager, they've got another project to do, and we just canned the project. That just never happened. So the mobile app and the to condition monitor sites or panels, and well, that one and the Beckinsale website have gone. They don't exist. And it comes back to the fragility, on the one hand, of digital outputs, but also doing these projects at a university. Because the university encourages innovation, encourages to do things, and you can do that. So the projects in themselves were very successful, but their long-term prognosis was that they died. And which is, it's a sadness to me. I take pride in the fact that we did them, and we did them well, and we had very good outputs. We wrote them all up, so it's available. They've been published. But, they don't exist except for the RAMP project. And then just to finish up, this also came out, so that's the book from 1957, Interpreting Our Heritage by Freeman Tilden. And this since I only learnt about this saying when I got to England. It was not something I was exposed to in South Africa. People often think it was his saying, but it's not. He found it in a National Park Service manual and published it in 1957. I think it's something we should always bear in mind. Through interpretation, understanding, through understanding, appreciation, and through appreciation, protection. I think that's a really useful thing to bear in mind when you're thinking not just about rock art, but lots of different things. The book, I think, is still available. You can get it on eBay or A-Books or something like that. And this acknowledgements, obviously a project like this doesn't happen just with one person, but there are loads of people that come together to work on a project like this. But the person who really started it all was Stan, on the left-hand side of here. Stan just recently turned 92, still going strong. And that's how he used to do his work with newsprint, out in the open, crayon, and rubbing the carvings and then turning them into line drawings. Great. Thank you very much.
Is there any question? Amanda.
Thanks for that, Aron. Also, really nice to see and interesting projects. I just wanted to focus in a little bit. You mentioned that there were problems with it, but your digital field forms. In our experience, the digital field forms are great to a point, and the point at which it doesn't become great is the extracting of the information on the back end, and where it goes and who actually processes it. Yeah. So you can generate this wonderful data, but it does nothing.
We had a different model to that. So there was a complimentary website, and the information would go to the website. But what we did as well when we set the whole thing up, in the UK and in England, you have different heritage environment records, and the site reports would then be pinged to the different HERs, different environment records. So what happened when they arrived at the HERs, the Heritage Environment Records, Angas, I don't know. But at least they went somewhere which had a statutory responsibility to look after records. And in fact, the Beckinsale records, the tangible records, like his redrawings and stuff, which he donated to the university, went to a museum, a university museum. And I gave them all the digital records as well. And they also went to the Northumberland HER. So the information wasn't totally lost. In the form that it was so accessible to the public, we lost. But that information is still there if people want. And in fact, just a few months ago, I was contacted by someone who's interested in trying to resurrect the Beckinsale website. And I'm not sure that's going to happen, but we'll see. So yes, so we realized if we just hang on to the data, then that was going to be futile. But there wasn't a huge amount of data that came in, but the data that did come in was pinged to the different HERs. So we were cognizant of that problem, given the fragility of these projects within universities. I mean, we did them because we were encouraged to apply for projects, but I think these kinds of projects should be happening within museum services, within heritage services and stuff like that, where there would be a greater chance of there being some kind of longevity to them. And the data would then be accessible to researchers from different universities and interest groups should they desire them. Yeah. The question there.
Thank you. I'm interested on the mobile app, and I'm thinking if it's also meant to enhance guiding and visitor experience. But I'm also thinking, have we have challenges of unguided visitors using the app, getting into the sites and the behavior, how to monitor their behavior around the sites? Because in our case, it may be a good thing. That's why we are so skeptical of even putting coordinates of the sites where there are no guides. Yeah. Because we are afraid of damage and
of course
other unacceptable behavior.
Yeah. So as I mentioned right at the very beginning, the ethos of data and data sharing in the UK around rock art was very different to what I experienced in South Africa and probably Southern Africa as a whole. Stan Beckinsale had been publishing books from the early 70s with coordinates of panels. So what we were doing was not doing anything different by putting all the coordinates out there and encouraging people to visit. Nothing different. They do have, I mean, you will have some guides taking people to sites or to panels as part of trips around Northumberland, but you don't get specific rock art trips. It doesn't have such a high value in the UK as it has in other parts of the world. Or it's just partly maybe because it's in the north of England or in the south of England. In the south of England, it would probably be a World Heritage Site by now. But it doesn't, so our observations, because we visit a lot of sites, is very little human interference with the carvings. People tend to respect them. We don't. I can think of 3 or 4 instances of graffiti, over 20 years, out of over 700 panels, and minimal graffiti. So that of course, that's a concern, but it didn't really factor into what we were doing because of the situation on the ground. Yeah, but I can see in Swaziland how it might be a problem. I understand that.
Huh? Here. Okay. The shorter skirt.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My question goes back to the first project you did, the 2005 to 2008 one.
There was no project from 2005.
Like the website?
That's 2002 to 2004.
Okay. Okay. So where I'm getting 2008?
Hey, Angas.
Okay. Considering the digital landscape at that time, people were not so much into digital tools. But from your presentation, we think there was so much traffic on the website.
Yeah.
And right now, in 2024, people are making digital tools, but they are failing to then disseminate them to then these tools accepted by the public.
Right.
How did you go about it?
I think first of all, it's a great question. We made all the data accessible. It was free, it was accessible, it was packaged in such a way that people could actually work quite easily through the website. There were loads of images. It was what was then, and I think has changed now, it's like a free economy. We just put it all out there, and we had very good. I worked closely with the university media, and we got a lot of press out of it. Press releases, as I said, it was on BBC breakfast television. I mean, this is just unheard of, really, to have a rock art at that level, but we managed to organize it. Claire Jordan was the name, the press officer. So we just had a lot of traffic, and then it spread. And we had all those visitors, and the visitors just mostly from the UK. And as I said, I've got the data, but and named papers. I didn't put them in because I could have spoken for 2 hours about this all. But we had people visiting from over 100 countries. They must have got to hear about it. Newspapers. We had people from the States writing to us, complimenting us about it. How have you done this? We want to do it with the rock art that we have here in the Southwest. We had folk who find it difficult walking, saying thank you very much for letting us know which sites are accessible by wheelchair, and so on. So it just had that impact, and it went far and wide, and we were blown away. I'll be honest by I was talking through the weekend because we launched it on a Friday. I was talking to the website developer Horacio, and he was worried that the whole server would collapse. But it was just it was free, lots of images, it was well packaged. The information was all there, and just a whole range of other factors that kicked in. And I mean, we were thrilled that was the outcome. And this was a rock art which is it's not colorful, it's not as celebrated as we have on the walls around here, or what we have from Southern Africa. It's just, it just caught people's imagination at the time.
Last question.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. I would like to know, when you were starting your project, did you have something like a management plan, which will perhaps have a monitoring program? How are you going to continue with this? And also ensuring consistency, that whatever that I may be able to get in the app or on the website, it will be the same as it is on site. Did you have anything like you will be doing this every 6 months or 3 months to ensure consistency? And also, I'd like to know, what was your number 1 and 2 challenges in doing or developing the website and the app?
So you're talking about the monitoring app specifically? Yeah. So we didn't have a management plan. No, there is no management plan for that rock art. It's just out in the countryside, out in the field. It's not part of a World Heritage Site. The organisation that in England is supposed to oversee it is English Heritage. They're not really worried about the rock art. They have. There was one person, a member of staff with an interest, who was on our, who we engaged with, but there was not a lot of interest from the Heritage Agency in the rock art. It's just, it's just there just wasn't interest, and it's a sadness, it's a shame. But I think it's about the fact in England, and this has been my view on it, is England is very divided between the north and the south. And this rock art is all in the north and into Scotland. And I thought if it was in the south, maybe it would be a World Heritage Site by now. And I told English Heritage people this once, and they just sat and looked at me. So yeah, there was no intention to monitor on like a annual or biannual basis. This was just something which was open to the public. If they wanted to contribute to understanding the condition and the risk to these panels, that they completed. And in terms of consistency, you're always going to have a problem with consistency. I think there was some boxes to tick which were going to be quite consistent. But the one that I mentioned earlier about how do you judge the height of a panel, we tried to provide as much supporting information as we could to arrive at a point where people gave more or less consistent heights. And that's why we worked with members of the public. We created some drawings to suggest ways in which they could do that. But how did it work for them? And we then tweaked it. We changed it slightly on the basis of input we got at the workshops. And it was important to know the height of the panels because of wind and the direction of the wind and, just issues around the fragility of some of the carvings on the panels. Yeah. But no, we didn't. I mean, there was no management plan. There was no, I would love there to have been a management plan in the UK. I would love there to have been an annual monitoring system. No, nothing like that. And now that we have finished this app and the app doesn't, it's not available, I don't think anyone's actually checking these sites, these panels. They just sit out in the countryside like they have for the last 4,500, 3,000 years. And hopefully they'll survive. But climate change will kill them in time. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Aron. Oh, sorry. We are late.
Okay. We can talk later.
Yeah.